Welcome. I'm Julian Rogers in the Turks and Caicos. We're here to chat with the Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, none other than the Honorable Washington Mizik. He is the current chairman of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, who are due to hold their governors meeting here in the Turks and Caicos in June. We'll talk to the Premier not only about his role as the leader of the country, but also as that of the President of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, and also the President of the UK Overseas Territory Association. He chairs the rotational position as the political counsel. He's also the Vice President of the Turks and Caicos branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and a representative of the Turks and Caicos Caribbean Heads of Government meetings. Of course, for CARICOM, he's also have that role of building the relationship with regional institutions as well. So, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Welcome you, Turks and Caicos. Looking forward to a fantastic time here with the rest of the Caribbean and for the CDB board meeting.
Let's talk first, Premier, about the Turks and Caicos. How have you done?
Turks and Caicos has done extremely well. I mean, in terms of where we are and the recognition of the progress that's been made here, it's all been fairly new. Just about everything you see around here is less than 50 years old. So we're basically, can be considered the new kid on the block, if you like. But we have a very successful economy. Tourism obviously is our main industry. In fact, it is sometimes said that Turks and Caicos is probably the most tourism-dependent country in the world next to Macau. And but we've done very well. We have been able to consistently, for the better part of the last 6 years, produce a surplus in our revenue, government revenue, our budgets. We have a BBB+ credit rating. Government have zero debt, and a very hefty reserve, including a sovereign wealth fund. So I think we're doing very well, all things considered. You know.
As you say that, I have to ask you, how did you survive COVID?
A confluence of events or circumstances meant that we pulled through COVID very, very good. We had assistance from the United Kingdom. We got the vaccine early. Our population responded quickly, so we ramped up to about 80% our vaccination rate by the end of the summer of 2021, I think it would be. And then, of course, the fact that we entered the COVID with significant reserve, we were able to really preserve life and livelihood by actually assisting the population through stimulus grants and other assistance. So yeah, we've done very well through COVID.
So having gone through that period, what really are the new priorities here?
Well, you know, there's a word that's overused sometimes called sustainability. And our focus is on building resilience and sustainability. And that involves focusing on ensuring that not only sustainability in terms of the economy, but also in terms of our sensitive environment, which is very much tied to the economy. Everyone in this island and this country makes their living off the natural capital of the economy, so we're very concerned about ensuring that that is preserved, but also keeping a good social balance. Turks and Caicos depend very, very largely on foreign labor. And so we've got issues of housing and all of those kinds of things that we've got to focus on to ensure that the environment is not degraded and the five-star destination that we are known for is actually maintained. So yes, those are some challenges, but I think we've designed and are designing solutions and approaches to ensure that our economy and our social and environmental sectors are sustainable.
You're fresh from presenting a budget to this country. What would you say are the priority items that you're addressing in this?
You know, a big umbrella issue of my government is human capital development. Okay. Also, another big issue at the moment is price inflation. So what we, and of course the social quality of life issues. So my budget includes a lot of deals with how do we protect the vulnerable. So people are looking for social assistance. We've upped the level of assistance, investing huge amount of money in scholarships, grants, and full scholarships, and investing in education. We just acquired property to put TVAT, expanding or standing up in place a well-functioning hospitality school. So the focus really is on the human capital development, improving the social situation of the public, and also investing heavily in infrastructure, because I believe that wealth is created by the private sector. Government distributes it, but it's created by the private sector, and the private sector needs to have solid, dependable, sustainable infrastructure in order to run on and to develop that wealth.
Let's talk about the infrastructure. It seems the airport is a major priority here.
This destination is well served from probably over a dozen gateways in the United States. The United States and North America generally is our source market for tourism. We actually have outgrown our current facilities, and we have to be improvising in order to process the traffic. So we're making a huge investment in developing a whole new terminal that's going to probably run us into multiple millions of dollars. We're making some good progress with the consultancy, looking at the structure, ownership structure, the funding structure, and hopefully we can all have that done between now and the end of the year. So by next year, we can look at scheduling the actual construction time, which I believe will probably begin in 2024. These big projects have huge life cycle. It takes a long planning cycle, and so we're getting there. We're fortunate in that the Airports Authority itself have significant reserves, and so we should be able to do it quite comfortably without actually consigning the facility to an outside operator.
What about the communication around the islands themselves?
The communication around Turks and Caicos is in need of improvement. Dependency or the ability to communicate between the islands, particularly in a bad hurricane, is a problem. And we are now looking at actually putting a fiber ring around the islands to improve that. That is something that is also topical. And again, I expect that we'll see some movement on that in the current financial year.
Let's talk now about the relationships you have with the nearby territories, like the Bahamas, for instance.
Well, the Bahamas is considered to be family because their bloodlines, of course, the nearest Bahama island is 40 miles off from here. Anagua, Mayaguana, they're between 40 to 60 miles away. And so there's always been freedom of movement between here and the Bahamas, even when even in relationship to the legislation, it's not strictly adhered to when it comes to the movement of people between here and Bahamas. Everybody in the Turks and Caicos Islands and everybody just about in the Bahamas have families in both places. So that relationship is probably our strongest relationship because of our proximity, but also because of the bloodlines. between us. Of course, in my capacity as the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, I represent the overseas territories. The position, of course, as you know, is rotational. So I represent places like the British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, Anguilla,
Cayman.
and the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos. But our relationship, our strongest relationship, remains with the Bahamas.
And the historic relationship with, say, Jamaica?
We have a historic relationship with Jamaica because we were sort of a sub-dependence of the UK through Jamaica up until when Jamaica became independent in 1962, right? Then we shared a governor with the Bahamas until the Bahamas became independent. And since then, we've had set up our own governor. So we're more direct. The relationship has become more direct between us and the United Kingdom ever since then. But we still maintain a very strong relationship with Jamaica. Of course, a lot of us, including myself, would have been educated in Jamaican institutions or regional institutions based in Jamaica. So that relationship is very strong, perhaps stronger than it is in the Eastern Caribbean, again, because of proximity and history.
I want to expand that then to the TCI's relationship with the rest of the Caribbean. Let's talk about your role in CARICOM.
I consider myself personally a Caribbean man because I've had the privilege of living in and visiting and developing relationships with people across the region. And I've been around, been involved in public life long enough to appreciate the contributions that have been made by the region. In the past, we've sourced teachers, doctors, engineers, police officers, and you name it, from different parts of the Caribbean, particularly places like Barbados. And more recently, a large number of our police officers have been coming from places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have strong relationships with many of the leaders in the region by virtue of the long time I've spent in politics and meeting them one-on-one and developing relationships. So, I've come to value the importance of it. And while our growth has been uneven, I think it's critical that we kind of develop a mentality of one for all and all for one, because we live in a region that's very volatile, and one could be up today and down tomorrow, and so that sort of a dependence and the strength of having each other's back, to me, is very critical. And so that is something that I believe in, and I think in my role is something that I would like to focus on and promote, that regardless to where each of us may be in terms of our growth, economic growth, we should and could contribute to the region and especially to the bank's operation and the bank's sustainability and survivability, because I noticed in a lot of cases with some of the more prosperous economies, there's this tendency not to appreciate the significant role that the bank plays, and I think that is very short-sighted.
I'll just ask you to just respond to the offer from the president of Guyana, for instance, to deal with food security by offering the vast land space of Guyana for production of food and distribution across the region.
Well, I think that was very magnanimous of him. I think for a place like the Turks and Caicos, it was a small population and significantly removed. The logistical issue of transportation could be a problem in making use of that, even if you have persons here who may want to invest in agriculture or in growing food. There's still the question of how do you get it here. But I do believe there may be opportunities to trade with a place like Guyana, particularly when one look at, I don't know what's the state of their forestry products are, But given our construction boom here in these islands, if there are materials or construction materials that could be sourced from a place like that, it would be great. I mean, at the moment, we're sourcing it from other places in the Caribbean, including Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and Cuba, which tend to be a little closer. But again, when you look at what Guyana offers, I mean, most of the light poles are from Guyana. And when you look at the quality of the lumber, I think there are opportunities there to cross-invest across this region in each other's economy to the benefit of the region. I think sometimes we don't realize the strength that we have. We look out for everything and ignore the possibility of developing the relationships that we have by cross-investing in each other's economy, making it easier. I mean, a great example has been the Sandals Corporation and their ability to tap into the resources and provide employment opportunities for many destinations within the region, including Turks and Caicos. In fact, in a lot of destinations, the airline services have been improved as a result of having a large player such as Sandals.
And as you mentioned, an airline, you certainly have a good example in terms of interregional carriage within the Caribbean.
Yeah, we're very proud of Caribbean and its ability to reach out to the rest of the Caribbean sister territories, and I'm hoping that they can continue to, with their expansion and their investment. For us, it's a matter of pride to be able to do that.
Let's turn our attention to one of the other CAPs, that is the Board of Governors of the Overseas Territories. You've had this now role for some time as part of this rotation. What would you say are the priorities?
The overseas territories in the Caribbean have done well, by and large. Most of them, certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos, have done very well. Some of the other territories in the Eastern Caribbean have not done quite as well. There's a terminology that came from a book that was written by another Caribbean personality that says small is beautiful, I think. And I think we underestimate the strength and the ability that we can, and the role that we can play in the region and in the CDB. And what I would like for my colleagues in the overseas territories to do is to, even though I am the rotational governor and the chair, I would certainly want to get their full support because I do believe that we could make this particular conference something extraordinary, and that their presence here could benefit them and the bank. I can certainly see a situation where certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos are no longer sort of even though we may be borrowing countries, we're no longer dependent on some of the concessionary funding that the bank may have available, but some of our other sister territories are. And to the extent that we could contribute to the, I don't know, to some kind of fund to help with pockets of needs in those territories or across the region. I think that the kind of conversation we should start to have instead of constantly looking out for everything, because I think it's important to remember where we were once and relate that to where we are today, and understand that the big wheel comes around, and you never know if it'll ever happen again. So that's what I would encourage them to do, and hope that we can play a pivotal role in the success and sustainability of the organization.
the grouping as such has a particular relationship, of course, obviously, with Britain. How do you see the territories now helping to reshape the impression or the relationship with Britain?
Well, I tell you one thing, global Britain, in my view, seems very keen on maintaining a relationship with the overseas territories. I think it stands to reason that exiting a Brexit, it means that their sphere of influence is less. And also what we've seen recently with the royal visits through the region, that cannot make the assumption any longer that the former territories, the former colonies, are happy and is prepared to carry on as usual. So I think there seems to be a willingness to focus more attention on the remaining overseas territories. And to the extent that there's this idea of offering the overseas territories parliamentary representation, direct parliamentary representation in the UK, there are varying degrees of views on that. And it's not something I want to necessarily comment on, because I think, I don't support us being subsumed into the UK or anything like that. But I think the relationship in more recent times, particularly in relationship to the COVID pandemic, have actually served the Turks and Caicos and the overseas territories well. So I don't know where that relationship would end, but clearly there's a yearning from people everywhere to have control of their destiny. And that's where I will leave that. But I believe we do have a role to play in the region, even as we also are influenced and are supported by the United Kingdom. We have to exert our dependency. I rather like the idea of playing the game without the name, whatever, because I think it will serve us well. And I believe relationships are more important than labels. So that's my view.
And you wouldn't label that independence?
As I said, I think playing the game without the name is where my head is, but you know, that decision is to be made by the next generation. We are in the process of developing a more advanced constitution, or trying to, because what we've had, our constitution has regressed since 2006 as a result of the suspension in 2009. So we're looking at developing a more modern partnership relationship with the United Kingdom. Again, given our size, we have to be concerned, and particularly Turks and Caicos, given where we are located, with huge neighbors that are not necessarily quite as democratic as our tradition. We have to be careful about the relationships that we maintain.
And as you talk about your neighbors, Cuba?
Cuba we have Cuba, we got Hispaniola, both which are within 100 miles from our shores. Those are, and of course, our neighbor, the Bahamas. Jamaica is about 400 plus miles away from us. But that's would be our neighborhood there. But
and you're comfortable in that neighborhood?
The biggest threat to Turks and Caicos sovereignty, if you can call it that, since we're not a nation, is really this threat from illegal immigration from our neighbors next door to the south of us. And I do believe the region and the world have an obligation to do a better job of assisting our neighbors in Haiti so that they are not trafficked, because a large part of what happened is literally trafficking. Poor people don't even know where they're going sometimes, you know. So again, as I discussed with the president in the past, to the extent that the CDB and the region could develop initiatives to help some of our neighbors who are may want to leave, if we can create conditions at home which would prevent that from happening, fewer people will leave and fewer people will lose their lives on the high seas.
Sustainable development and net zero 2050 agendas mean for Caribbean energy transition. This is the second ever annual meeting webinar focused on sustainable energy. The first was held at the annual meeting in 2014, when the bank commenced its focus on renewable energy and energy efficiency. At the time, the bank was developing the energy sector policy and strategy, which has since guided the bank's work over the period 2015 to present. The bank has made much progress under the ESPS, approving some $231 million US dollars for renewable energy, energy efficiency, electricity infrastructure projects over the 4-year period. And sustainable energy is now mainstreamed in the bank's operation. It is therefore appropriate that for this second sustainable energy webinar, it is also being held in the context of the bank's revising its and updating the energy sector policy and strategy to guide its work over the next period, possibly through to 2028, 2030. I mention all this to emphasize the importance of this webinar, as the outcomes of the deliberations will be noted in the context of the review of the policy. Ladies and gentlemen, the energy issues are pervasive and intertwined in all aspects of our development. They're so intertwined that at times we take them for granted. Even in our daily lives, we take energy for granted. In fact, many people only recognize the importance of energy when there's a disruption in the power supply. Sustainable energy transition are wide-ranging. The issues span energy access and poverty, and energy poverty. And yes, we have many, many persons in our community, in our borrowing members, who still use charcoal for cooking and use kerosene, and children use kerosene for lighting. It's about the just transition. It's about cybersecurity. Yes, we have had issues where utilities have been held ransom, a victim of cybercrime. It's about digitalization, smart grid, democratization of the grid, resilience, private sector investment in the range of options we have, electrification of transport, and so on. Obviously, for this seminar, we wouldn't be covering the gamut, but the focus will be on a small segment which has to do with the transition. Today, we will receive a global perspective. We'll look at the regional perspective, and of course, we'll hear from the policymakers and other key stakeholders. It is my privilege and delight to introduce the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, Mr. Francisco Lacamera, who will bring us the global perspective. As you're aware, IRENA is an intergovernmental organization that supports countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future and serves as a principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, resource, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. Mr. Lacamera has been the Director General for IRENA since April 2019 and brings more than 30 years of experience in the field of climate, sustainability, and international cooperation. He has been providing stellar leadership at a critical time for climate change and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. He's a major voice in guiding the energy transition. Without much further ado, I will invite Mr. Lacamera to make his address at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph Williams. It's a really pleasure to be with you. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it is my pleasure to join you all virtually today and to share insight from ARENA World Energy Transition Outlook and perspectives on the energy transition of the small island development states in particular. I am happy to see representatives from development partners, financing institutions, as well as government amidst the audience today. Strong collaboration and enduring partnership will certainly be essential for an accelerated transition and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Globally, the need for energy transition has become even more evident. For CEEN, this is especially true as high fossil fuel prices, energy security concern, and the urgency of climate change continue to hinder sustainable development and economic prosperity. ARENA's World Energy Transition Outlook 2022 presents a pathway to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius. We consider electrification and energy efficiency to be the main decarbonization driver enabled by renewables, green hydrogen, and sustainable biomass. Renewable energy is now the cheapest option in most regions, dominating new energy addition year on year. We have witnessed several positive developments in the recent years: increase in added renewable power capacity and energy transition investment, continued cost decline, acceleration of end-use electrification, and the emergence of green hydrogen as a major topic for energy policymakers. However, the energy transition is far from being on track. This is with an holistic policy framework, serious investment, and international cooperation, the energy transition can be accelerated. Investment in the 1.5 scenario will yield a cumulative payback of at least $61 trillion by 2050. The benefit of energy transition greatly exceed costs. The socioeconomic benefits and the revival of industries and sectors currently hampered by fuel costs and the logistics of importing this fuel will be enormous. These factors are of particular importance for CEEN. The energy transformation is not only a matter of gaining energy independence and reducing fuel import costs, but it will also contribute to job creation, improved livelihoods, poverty eradication, and economic growth. ARENA statistics, however, indicate a reduction in the growth of renewable energy capacity in CEEN. A total installed capacity of 5.94 gigawatts by the end of 2021, with the Caribbean accounting for 70% of the share with 4.12 installed gigawatts, mostly solar, bioenergy, hydro, and wind, but no ocean energy technologies to date. In addition to COVID-19 pandemic, had a negative impact on investment. This was further exacerbated by current geopolitical issues, resulting in energy price hikes and compromised food security. So, dear colleague, CEEN have demonstrated their collective determination to achieve net zero emission by 2050 through their commitment to new updated national determined contribution, the NDCs. To meet the Paris Agreement, the pace of renewable deployment must triple. Such an increase is only possible if appropriate and tailor-made policies, technologies, financing, and other frameworks are developed to cater the CEEN's special circumstances and needs. ARENA, through the CEEN Lighthouse Initiative, continues to align its work plan and foster strategic partnership to offer tailored technical assistance, capacity building, research, analytical work, and innovative financing solutions implemented through strong and coordinated collaboration. I am proud to report that ARENA is currently providing NDC support to 26 seats through 61 activities, with 16 of them completed, 24 ongoing activities, and 21 scoping for possible support. So, dear participant, adequate, predictable, and affordable financing remain the key to unlocking the energy transition. SEEDs will need to attract at least a total of 17 billion of US dollar worth of investment by 2030, if we are to reach the 1.5-degree goal by 2050. They are, however, facing challenges. We must do more to support SEEDs project concretely. In the context of project facilitation support, ARENA's ongoing collaboration with UNDP, Sea4All, the Green Climate Fund, under the Climate Investment Platform initiative aims at accelerating investment in renewable energy. In this effort, ARENA teams up with member countries, financial institutions, project developers, and the private sector in developing solid project pipeline backed by the government, assisting in bringing project proposals to bankability, and facilitating their access to finance. Complementary to this initiative is the Energy Transition Accelerating Financing, the so-called ETAF platform, a new global climate finance facility to accelerate the transition to renewable energy in developing countries. So, dear friends, today we live in uncertain times. We are emerging from a global pandemic, which has caused untold suffering as well as economic hardship. This period requires extraordinary measures. It is therefore essential to assure that the energy transition proceeds at a sustainable pace, leaving no one behind. Special emphasis will also need to be placed on supporting countries, including few SEEDs countries such as Trinidad and Tobago, currently reliant on hydrocarbon production and export. We must do what we can to avoid SEEDs becoming a dumping ground for all fossil fuel technologies or outdated renewable energy assets, while the rest of the world surges ahead. In this sense, establishing regional research hubs and facilitating the testing of innovative and tailored solutions such as ocean technologies will help to maintain SEEDs on a par with the rest of the world. It is evident that we need to do more to accelerate investment for the energy transition in SEEDs, as well as increase efforts to ensure such a transition is just, equitable, and shielded from unexpected disruption. Forums such as these are crucial opportunity for government, investors, financial institutions, private sector, and other stakeholders to engage in dialogue on emerging and key technology, policy, and finance issues. To conclude, let me extend my sincere appreciation for the invitation to share ARENA's perspective. I look forward to a fruitful discussion and to the opportunity to work closely with the Caribbean Development Bank and other regional partners to accelerate the Caribbean's energy transition. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Camara, and for the challenges you have identified, but also the important role for SEEDs and what we need to do and to position ourselves to ensure our own transition. So we really do appreciate those very pointed remarks and very important in setting the framework for our conversation this morning. Before you go, though, I just wanted to use the opportunity to raise one question within our time, one or two questions that I think are relevant that have come up in our conversations over time. And the first one has to do with the matter of some of the challenges. So here goes. The disruption in energy markets has brought the matter of energy security and affordability to the fore, particularly for countries in Europe, but also the rest of the world, including the Caribbean, where these are layered on top of all other special challenges that persist in this region. What advice would you give to our regional policymakers and regulators who are required to make decisions which balance energy security, resilience, and affordable energy?
Thank you for your question, Joseph. And naturally, when we talk and we discuss the long-term scenario, it's important that governments have a clear understanding of the step to be taken in be coherent with a long-term scenario that may bring the Caribbean to be in line with the Paris Agreement, but more than that, trying to move to an energy system that is cleaner, more economical, that may be social benefits like more jobs and more GDP. Naturally, what is important is to have the right planning in place, and this also means that we have to abandon to use the subsidies for feeding the fossil fuel use in the energy system. This means that it could be done in a very exceptional case, but this must be transparent, limited, and very well placed. Another aspect, the main part of the energy use is sometime in the government. So it's in the government building, in the government logistic. So it's important that the first actor moving as fast as possible to a new renewable energy system is just the public sector. And then provide for a widespreading the use of solar, for example, in the private house, so facilitating the loans for this kind of activities. And as I say in my presentation, now we have two financial initiatives in ARENA that are very well tailored to the Caribbean and the small islands and needs. I'm talking about especially about the ETAF, the Energy Transition Accelerated Financing, where we have already some important commitment by government and financial institutions. So we are really ready to work also with the Caribbean Bank for developing a list of projects that can be presented in the occasion to the ARENA, so that the ARENA can support the preparation of the documentation that may be the kind of a documentation that is enough for the financial institution to assess the interest to fund in the project, and we'll be together with you until the project will be funded. In case also provide the funded of a DTAF. This is very important. It's very easy to do, to connect through our website, fill in the form, trying to work together. I had today a very interesting discussion with the president of the bank, but really we are ready to work with any of you to bring more investment for renewable energy in the Caribbean.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We may have time to squeeze one other. I think it's very important. When we look at as we emerge from the pandemic, we have observed supply chain disruptions, the matter of critical mineral shortages, which have had negative impacts on prices of certain renewable energy technologies and storage technologies. And as you know, price of technology has been an important part of helping the transition to move forward. So the question is, how much of a risk is there that these could serve to delay the transition?
So naturally, this is a very critical area. And so naturally, it's natural to have concern really concerning the supply chain and the use of the mineral and rare earth. So, but first of all, we pay attention to this problem. But the mineral and rare earth are not rare, geologically speaking. So we have to pose the right policies to tackle this problem and to ensure that the supply chain will be not hampered by this mineral and rare earth. So this means also provide for legislation that allow for rapid permit naturally with the right attention to the environment for new mining. It's also important working on the innovation and on the circular economy. These are aspects that may reduce the pressure of mineral and rare earth in our growth. So if we act coherently, right policies, innovation, and circular economy, we may tackle the risk and avoiding to be stuck by the lack of supply. But my last comment, and I also want to say that during the pandemic, when we talk about the supply chain, and generally speaking, has been demonstrated as renewables and show to be the more resilient way to produce electricity today in the world.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate those pointed responses, and we really have been privileged to have your contribution to this very important seminar. Thank you very much, Director General.
Thanks.
Hope we continue to work together. Thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, we are going to be moving right along. We will have, as I mentioned earlier, we hope to have a little bit of an insight into the regional situation, and at this time, we're going to be having one of our team members, Mr. Christopher Strawn, a member of the Sustainable Energy Unit here at the Caribbean Development Bank, to give us somewhat of a synopsis of the situation in the region. Before he comes, we'll have a very, very brief clip to remind us of the importance of the subject matter. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Joseph said, my name is Christopher Strawn. I'm a Sustainable Energy Specialist here at the Caribbean Development Bank, and it's my pleasure to present a brief synopsis today on the energy situation here in the Caribbean. During my presentation, I propose to briefly discuss the key energy sector challenges for CDB borrower member countries, or BMCs as we call them, where the region is in its energy transition, and what is required to achieve national and regional targets. Further, I'll touch on how CDB proposes to enhance its support for its BMCs through its revised energy sector policy and strategy going forward. So let's begin with the main energy sector challenges. When we speak of the energy sectors in our BMCs, we can consider them generally in two categories: net energy importing, which make up the vast majority, and net energy exporting, whose economies are largely driven by hydrocarbons. The main energy sector challenges facing BMCs fall under two headings: climate change and energy security. As we are aware, the global energy sector is driven by the fact that fossil fuels, which remain the dominant form of energy, are not sustainable and are the key culprit in the climate crisis. Renewable energy can help CDB BMCs eliminate their relatively minuscule contribution to global carbon emissions while simultaneously addressing, in part, other climate-related issues such as low resilience. This, given that renewable energy options are often more amenable to decentralized solutions like distributed RE generation and mini-grids. Now, it can be said that the major overarching issue for most BMCs, especially the net energy importers, remains a lack of energy security rooted in overdependence on imported fossil fuels. Emphasis being on overdependence and imported, reflecting risks of overconcentration, exposure to market vagaries, including price volatility. This energy insecurity in the context of small, isolated markets is manifested in supply risk, high costs, unaffordability, and price instability. Energy insecurity, therefore, undermines poverty reduction efforts and threatens the achievement of virtually all sustainable development goals. To illustrate the impact and potential risk of energy insecurity situation, consider that CDB BMCs imported an estimated 128 million barrels of oil equivalent in 2019 and expended approximately $8 billion. This $8 billion is more than the GDP of 8 BMCs combined. and more than 150% of the $5 billion food import bill over the same period. Just this year, the oil price shock has resulted in a 52% increase in world oil prices. If we assume that the 2022 energy demand has returned to around what it was about in 2019, BMCs would have spent an additional $1.8 billion to purchase fuel over the short period of January to May this year. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us pause on that for a few seconds. Please allow this to illustrate the grave development risks that our over-reliance on imported oil represents. In 150 days, BMC citizens collectively would have had to find $1.8 billion in additional cash. For context, and to further illustrate the undermining of poverty reduction efforts, this figure is more than the combined total of CDB's Special Development Fund resources, our main concessional resources targeting poverty reduction, deployed since 2006. That is SDF 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 combined, and approximates also to the total of all CDB approvals from 2017 to 2021. In summary, not moving to replace the current fossil fuel energy systems leaves us less climate resilient with higher carbon footprints, presents major risks to poverty reduction efforts and achievement of the SDGs due to the impact of oil markets in most BMCs, exposed to financial fiscal risk which undermine economic resilience efforts, and at risk of being uncompetitive and missing green trade opportunities. This is especially relevant to net energy exporters, considering that high carbon intensity could lead to potential exclusion from certain key commodity markets. If we look at the key opportunities that arrive for BMCs from the global agendas, first, as we established, pursuing climate and SDG targets will address other key issues associated with the energy and economic security. The climate and net zero thrusts can also unlock significant international support, including financing flows, to help countries to accelerate their transition. CDB will naturally continue to play a significant role in this. Enhance economic diversification through green products and services, and further, proactively addressing challenges linked to greening of international trade. For net energy exporters, in particular, accelerating the transition of their domestic energy systems will allow them to maximize on export revenue. Transitioning to renewables is a key climate imperative. However, the energy and economic security objectives remain a very compelling case. So where are we as a region? Currently, the share of RE capacity versus total installed electricity capacity is just 12%. The regional target agreed as part of the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy is 47% by 2027, which corresponds to 55% by 2030. We are way behind. How can we make up and accelerate for lost time? Between now and 2030, the region needs to install, on average, 320 megawatts per year. This is a 1,400% increase over the current rate and requires a 16-fold increase in investments to well over $1.25 billion annually. The vast majority of this investment will need to come from the private sector. It should be emphasized that the region is not short on renewable energy resources. Just to give an example, a recent study by IDB and CDB showed that the technically exploitable potential for fixed offshore wind was approximately 20 times the average electricity demand of the countries studied. If we add to this the abundant solar, conventional wind, geothermal, and hydropower, we can see clearly that even with demand growth associated with increased electrification, for example in the transport sector, there is more than enough potential supply, while noting that there must be challenges overcome associated with integration. Now, looking ahead, as part of CDB's revised energy sector policy and strategy, the bank is proposing to embed a framework for supporting the accelerated transition, known as the Accelerated Sustainable Energy and Resilient Transition, or ASSERT 2030. A key part of this framework is enhanced collaboration with a strong focus on the private sector. Further, some potentially transformative initiatives have been identified, some of which I've chosen to highlight here. Of note, leapfrogging of regulatory reforms to enable necessary quantum leaps in private investment, a resilient roof initiative, wide scaling of the public sectors, acceleration of the electrification of the transport sector, building on the momentum of green hydrogen and its potential to completely revolutionize the region's energy situation, offshore wind due to its massive resource potential, enhanced support to geothermal energy development, and a rapid rollout of battery energy storage systems to increase resilience and reduce challenges around the integration of renewable energy. This concludes my presentation this morning. In closing, I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to a robust panel discussion in the next segment of the seminar. With that, I'll hand the baton over to CDB's Director of Projects, Mr. Daniel Bess, who will take it from here. Many thanks, and over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. As we have seen and heard so far, the energy transition presents very difficult imperatives, challenges, and yes, opportunities. However, let's be clear. The global energy transition must happen and is happening for our very survival, especially for Caribbean countries as part of small island developing states. However, there are realities that each country must grapple with. Director General Lacamera did an excellent job of setting out the landscape at the global level. The issue is how. How do we navigate the transition in a context that takes our realities into account while ensuring that we take advantage of the opportunity? This also begs the question of speed. So what do we know? Well, we know challenges differ for hydrocarbon producers versus net energy importers, especially among our borrowing member countries. We also know that much depends on an enabling environment for private sector investment, since the vast majority of investments must come from the private sector. And with that, today we propose to have a conversation, a real conversation in the Caribbean context, which means it is very possible that we will see differences in views and perhaps vastly different perspectives. But hopefully this can bring further clarity to the issues and more precisely guide how we as the Caribbean Development Bank and as the Caribbean's Development Bank craft our energy sector policy and strategy, and in so doing meet our borrowing member countries where they are and support the acceleration of the transition while preserving key fundamental goals of affordability, resilience, and energy security. Our conversation this morning, therefore, is about how we navigate net zero emissions, the 2050 target, and the sustainable development agenda. We are delighted this morning to have with us a qualified and distinguished panel joining us. On our panel this morning, we have the Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson from Dominica, responsible for sustainable development, climate change, and energy matters. He's an RE champion and also has long experience at the international level as a diplomat advocating for small island development states issues. We have the Honorable Minister Stuart Young of Trinidad and Tobago, responsible for energy and energy industries, and has been a leading voice highlighting the need for a managed transition for hydrocarbon-based small island developing states. We have Ms. Angela Rainford, a leading renewable energy investor and developer who can speak from the perspective of the private sector. She heads a company, get this, which is responsible and has the reputation of delivering the single largest solar PV plant in the English-speaking Caribbean, while also developing many other RE projects. And we are very pleased to have Mr. Jerry Butler here with us, a lead advisor on renewable energy investment in the Caribbean, and also the founding chairman of the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum, or CREF, the foremost RE event for more than a decade. He has seen it all with respect to the evolution of the Caribbean market. But we also have you, and we want to consider you. We want you to consider yourselves the fifth panelist. We want to hear from you. So please, we invite you to submit questions, not at the end. Submit questions in the chat as the conversation unfolds, as these questions will help to focus the discussions around the most pertinent issues. We expect to have a robust conversation here this morning. Good morning to my fellow panelists. And
Good
this
morning.
morning, Honorable Minister Henderson, I am not sure of your cricketing skills, but you will be opening the batting for us. So, so let's get after it. And you know, straight off the bat, we know of the abundance of renewable energy resource potential within the region. We also know, of course, of the compelling economic case and the negative experiences of over reliance on oil, both in the 2008 and the 2014 crises and oil shocks. We also know, of course, that your country, Dominica, has been blessed with many renewable options. You have solar, hydropower, geothermal, energy, wind, and bioenergy. But if we're honest, the progress regionally has been slower than expected. Minister, I want to ask you to briefly provide some insight as to how the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica views the energy transition and the energy challenges that are faced, and essentially what is being done in the context of the net zero 2050 drive, and what are some of the key elements of your government's response, Minister?
Well, Comrade Best, I see you throw me a googly there or a full toss, perhaps. But no, but I'm happy to respond to that because yes, in fact, we've been pursuing this for a long time. And interestingly, I just came out from a meeting with my staff, and that's part of the challenge that we face with. How do we move quickly with this? And I have to say, I will not throw anything at you because normally it's institutions like yours that is criticized for the long time it takes to process. But in this case, it is really not. No, I want to say that. I want to place this on the record. It is not. It's not because of the lack of support from our development banks. In the case of the CDB, the CDB has been very progressive in helping us to navigate through many of the challenges. But I think there are a number of things that we've told, and I want to put this out there that the PPP model, and I know I know at some point the CDB was championing this through the region as well. I am all for the PPP model, especially to reduce debt burden on the states. But I think sometimes we oversimplify what is required to make these deals work. I mean, no private partner is coming into this because they want to save the environment so much that it is the only thing that matters to them. They expect a return on that investment. So what we found out is when the rubber hits the road, you get a little more bumps, than anybody told you. And the challenges that we face, for example, in the case of Dominica, first we went to tender, and I just want to share this. We went to a World Bank Finance tender process in 2019, and the reality of the numbers that came to us was nothing close, or as a matter of fact, twice what our consultants told us it would cost to do that project. Now, part of it is, of course, we were hit by intervening events, Hurricane Maria in 2017, and the devastation that was exposed. It brought out a lot of harsh realities of living on a small island state like Dominica. So that is part of the process. But we went ahead and negotiated with private partners who, from time to time, have found difficulties, continue or getting there, and that's why I said the World Bank, the CDB has been a good partner with us in helping to get to the finish line. Unfortunately, there are challenges, and I'm very happy that my government has taken decisions over the last couple of weeks that will ensure that we can overcome these challenges and move forward with our project to ensure that by 2024 we can commission our geothermal plants.
Thank you so much for that Minister. That's quite a solid perspective, and we will certainly unpack that as we move forward. I particularly like your reference to the disconnect between the what is estimated and the realities on the ground. I see Angela smiling, and I'm sure she will have something to say to that when she comes in. I'm also pleased to hear that CDB isn't to blame. I know my boss, the vice president of operations, is in it. So I'm happy that this is being recorded. So thank you so much for that, Minister. We will come back to that. Minister Young, after the opening batting, the number 3 batsman, of which your country has produced perhaps the greatest, and which you've named one of your initiatives after,
Correct.
comes in. So I want to turn to you at this time. We know that hydrocarbon producing countries, or I prefer to say net energy exporting countries, like Trinidad and Tobago, don't necessarily have the same energy sector challenges, such as lack of supply security, as others may have. I'd like you to provide us, Minister, with some insight as to how the government of Trinidad and Tobago views the energy transition challenge in the context of the Net Zero 2050 drive. And what may be some of the key elements of your government's response to this? Over to you, Minister Young.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bess, Angela, Vince. Good morning, wherever you are, Angela. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Trinidad and Tobago, exactly as you say, Mr. Bess, is in a very unique position compared to most of our CARICOM sister isles, that we have a hydrocarbon based economy. And we've just, in fact, yesterday completed the 3-day energy conference here. And in my keynote presentation 2 days ago, I said, look, stop. As Trinidadians, we have to just accept that. And it's a blessing, to be honest, right? It is a blessing that we were blessed with both oil and gas, that decades ago we took a decision to focus predominantly on the use of our gas hydrocarbon, which is the transition fuel. No one speaking energy transition says anything different, but gas is going to be the one that's here to stay. So first of all, I put on the table an acceptance that we are in a very different and unique position. Having said that, the policy has to be, and one of the things I've been pushing over the last year is we have to find balance, because I'm extremely concerned as an individual about what's taking place with the global climate change. That's the first point. I mean, we see it. My comrade from Dominica, I was a minister who had to assist when Maria hit them hard in Dominica. So all of the international panels and conversations I've been having discussions with, especially with the developed countries, is to say, hey, we are feeling the effects of it where I come from, and we have a responsibility. So we're working hard on that end as well. Unfortunately, technology is changing very, very quickly to assist with the cleaning of the energy. So first of all, gas is the cleanest hydrocarbon fossil fuel. So we are focused now on, okay, with gas, what are the technologies? We use gas in Trinidad to produce LNG and petchems of ammonia, methanol. Ammonia and methanol are the clean energies that they look at, clean commodities that they're looking forward for the energy future. So we're in a well-positioned place. But I'll say this, and I'm glad Mr. Henderson touched on it, because it's actually in my notes as I was listening to you all, and he jumped me on it. The thing that is bothering me a lot in the last 6 months as we've reopened and we're traveling all over the world, and I'm ensuring that I get the CARICOM voice into these international discussions where decisions are being taken with respect to energy security and sustainability. It bothers me. In our region, we have significant hydrocarbon resources, some of the most. We have Venezuela next door, that's the largest oil resources in the world. We now have Guyana, Suriname coming aboard. You have gas in Trinidad. But I hear so many stories from our Latin American brother and sister countries, as well as knowing our CARICOM countries, having the difficulties with, as you all put it, the energy security. Where's electricity going to come from? The opening speaker this morning talked about still using kerosene and on occasions burning charcoal to cook. What are we doing as a region? And one of the points I want to get discussion on this morning is we have a responsibility as a region. In Trinidad and Tobago, we are more than prepared to play our part, to get our resources from the region together to look after the region. How do we achieve that? What is it that we can do to make sure that a percentage of the resources aren't leaving the region, but are rather helping us here in the region? Next part of Trinidad's policy is we're moving to the renewables. So Angela, I'm hoping in a short time frame to get that project Lara done, and it'll be 112.2 megawatts. I met with Lightsource BP yesterday, and that will now take over and be the largest solar project in the English-speaking Caribbean. But that's only going to be the first one. So I'm trying to work into Trinidad and Tobago's thinking and the infrastructure, more renewable energy, right? Because 99.9% of our electricity needs are from natural gas because we're blessed with it. But the more we can come off of the use of natural gas using renewables, I'm all for it. And just before I close off on the opening, there's an important, essential role for the CDB in this, and for us to marry it as CARICOM and working with the CDB. A few weeks ago, I was at a meeting at the White House, and they were asking me, I think they had met with you all recently, the CDB, and they said, look, I think it was the OTC conference in Miami recently, and what role do I see for the CDB? I said, listen, the CDB is perfectly poised for this part of the equation. It's a layman's term, the clearinghouse for all of the developed countries, because the wealthy developed countries have a responsibility. They talk about it, that they're going to provide the financing to the smaller, especially like ourselves who get left behind, the smaller countries. We need not only financing and cheaper financing, we actually need funding via grants. All right, so don't come, and that is the point that tied in that Mr. Henderson spoke about, that I'd written down here. We talk about private sector. Private sector need a return. So when you're speaking to private sector and they start to talk about returns, and especially now with renewables, where you have the whole of Europe now jumping on the bandwagon and sucking up the resources towards renewables, meaning the plant and equipment is pushing up the cost of renewable plant and equipment. And again, we can get left behind. So we, as one voice in the CARICOM and in Latin America, need to speak out very loudly at the wealthy developed countries. It's not only about lower rates of financing, but it's also about grant funding to assist us in these areas of renewables. And if we allow that, it allows us then to contract directly, build the plants, etc. So there's no middleman in the middle taking that margin that still keeps it as expensive electricity for our citizens. I know I've spoken long, but I really feel passionately about this, and it's a perfect forum. So CDB, we are counting on you and willing to champion with you to be the voice for us, that let us gather all of these agencies, all of these banks, etc. Bring it to CDB, and you help us get it to our membership.
Thank you so much for that, Minister. Some excellent insights and we got a lot to unpack within there, and we will come back to that. I want you in the meantime to wrap your mind certainly around what the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism regulation means for the region, because you touched on that. I'm happy that you pointed to CDB's role, because we in the context of CDB achieving Paris alignment and all that entails, how do we support our net exporting border member countries? So we're gonna come back to that, because I think that needs to be said. I'm very happy for that perspective. Angela, I thought just now you smiled a little bit too wide when the minister mentioned the need for grants. But with that said, great to have you here. Angela, your project, the largest utility scale solar project in the region at 51 megawatts, which is in fact larger than the peak demand for many utilities within our region. Is it reasonable to argue, based on the experience of your company in Jamaica, that while there may be some challenges, there's really no barrier preventing large-scale private investment in the Caribbean? Really, I mean, we hear about it, but are there really still major barriers left? What is your perspective from the private sector?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me here. I'm a bit humbled. The two ministers are here as well, but I will give a biased private sector view, because that is where I'm basically what I'm representing. So Daniel, I guess to answer your question, I do think that there are still some barriers. It really depends on which country we're talking about. But I think the main barrier, I would say, would be around regulation, right? Policy setting. Because if effectively policy and regulation is what sets the rules of the game, it sets the framework upon which we as private sector can operate. And if that framework has not been set in a way that allows us to develop projects or to invest in projects, then that ultimately would be the main barrier. In general, I would say that basically a number of the countries already have attractive investment environments where we could operate. So I think in terms of encouraging private sector to participate, so tenders, whether it's by an auction, it is a bit disappointing to hear that coming from from the minister from Dominica that the auction prices didn't come in where you were expecting based on what the consultant said. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what the risk profile was that the investors were looking at and how it compared to the consultants themselves. But I would say that in general, there are a number of countries where we, for instance, at Seleco, we're actively looking for investment, actively constructing more projects this year. We've looked at utility scale. We continue to look at utility scale, but we're also increasingly looking at what we call the distributed power part of the market, which is where we're investing really for commercial and industrial entities. And even then, that's actually a different view of looking at bankability and risk, right? Because rather than looking at risk of the state, we're now looking at risk of the industrials and commercial players. I think that there have been a number of points made so far from both ministers, and to be honest with you, I would say they're all fairly valid. In terms of risk, is one that I would say that the private sector will always look at, and we will try to price. And so, in the case of Jamaica, for instance, one of the things that worked well in Jamaica was the fact that irrespective of political change, they actually maintained the same path in terms of vision and where they wanted to go. And if you think about if you're changing back and forth, if the rules of the game are kind of shifting beneath your feet, then that increases a risk from a private sector perspective, and that will make it even more so challenging for you to attract investment. I just speaking to, I guess, Christopher's slide, I was very surprised to see how much capital is viewed as being required for this region to truly go renewable. And so obviously private sector plays a big role, but that's a combination of equity, combination of debt. And I think, Daniel, from one of the panels that we were on together, it's also looking at that timeline in terms of where you are in the development cycle. So I think one of the key points that we had discussed on that previous panel a few months ago was in terms of early stage versus late stage. And so picking up on the point made by the minister from Trinidad and Tobago, Minister Young, in terms of grant funding, I am private sector, but I'm supportive of grant funding, especially where there is a gap, right? And I think from my experience, where we tend to find a gap is in the very, very early stages of projects to get them bankable and to make them actually investable projects. And so I think that's an area where if there were, additional grant funding, especially for the de-risking of the project on the technical side, that would be very interesting to see more of. The other elements in terms of grant funding, I would say, is going back to my earlier point about what are some of these challenges around regulation. And I think if you're able to access, there's a lot of grant funding that's primarily more for the governments. It's not really intended for private sector. It's really for governments and helping them with policy setting. And so I think if there were grants that were, which I'm pretty certain there is a lot of support, for instance, from groups such as the IDB, I know CDB is also involved, but supporting the technical capacity and building that knowledge base as to how do you actually frame things to attract private sector investment. So I'll perhaps just pause there, Daniel. I think we'll be teasing things out more in the conversation, but those are some of my opening thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angela. Yeah, I think in listening to you, you really hit on a number of areas where CDB can play quite a big role as it relates to regulation, also the timeline of development and how we can come into perhaps de-risk some of the initiatives. Jerry, I want to turn to you at this point. You have been in this for some time. You have brokered deals. You've shared correct from your vantage point. No, we've heard the private sector, we've heard from the ministerial side, net exporting, net importing. From your vantage point, watching the RE market in the Caribbean over time, what would you say are some of the key reasons why investment deals and hence the desired pace of the transition has not happened at the rate at which we want? I'd like you to provide some insights on that, certainly.
Well, certainly historically, when we started off in 2008, getting ourselves ready to get into, I think at the time it was COP21, and then we moved into the Paris Accords, we saw a general change in the acceptance of the fact that, one, climate change was real, And two, renewable energy in the Caribbean had a practical purpose. So back then, the Caribbean, 10 of the 20 most highly indebted countries in the world were Caribbean countries. And when I say highly indebted, I mean debt to GDP exceeding 120%. So it wasn't like these countries were in a position to borrow a huge amount of funding to jumpstart any new industry. The other thing is the countries were extremely vulnerable to the elements of climate change, and their debt was directly tied to the fact that they would build, borrow money, build, borrow money, build, and then a hurricane or an earthquake or a natural disaster would come along. They were monocrop economies, either depending on tourism or depending on agriculture or something of that sort, and they'd get wiped out. Then they have to go to the IMF, go on a program, borrow again to try to build. And in the meantime, there was a brain drain. And then in the meantime, to keep the lights and electricity on, they had these huge foreign import bills for energy that they weren't producing. So they had to borrow money to buy oil and gas. At that time, the architecture was slow-speed diesel and heavy fuel oils. That was about it, and they were tied into, the utilities were tied into contracts to make these engines work and give a payback period of well over 20 years. So what has changed over time is the fiscal situation of some of these countries when it came to their high debt dependence has changed. Certainly Jamaica is an example of going in the right direction. Then in addition to that, what we found, say at CREF this year, which was our 14th iteration of CREF, was that there was a huge amount of funding available, both in terms of grant funding and in terms of technical funding, and in terms of private sector funding. Obviously, with quantitative easing, there was a lot of cheaper money around to fund deals. And so because of that situation where there is money now available to fund deals, the real question that we discovered in this year's CREF is not that we had a technology grant, because certainly there's solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, all of the elements of technology that are natural to the Caribbean that we work with. There's more specific technology like seawater district cooling for our hotel plants to replace the current architecture for air conditioning. That's in place. All of the technology is in place. We seem to have the people. So we have the commitment, right? And we have the entrepreneurs. So when you have 400 to 500 people at a Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum conference, and they're all convalescing and they're all talking about the technology is there, hey, we have the money to do it. What seems to be the missing element over a period of time? The missing element now and the missing element over a period of time is exactly just one point: analysis paralysis. And the analysis paralysis is pinpointed at the human level. Almost every last one of my CREF stakeholders have told me that, and unfortunately, Vince and Stuart, you're in the upper echelons of this discussion. They have said the governments in the Caribbean are too slow, too reticent. They take too much time to get things done from one cabinet meeting to the other. And then, as Angela pointed out, just as they're about to get things done, they go to the population and there's a vote and the government changes. And when the government changes, we end up having to redo the whole thing again. So what would I say this time is going to make things work? And I've been in this game now for over 15 years. I would say a real push, a real dedicated and instrumental push on the part of governments, not just to pass legislation, but to actually get involved in the projects themselves, making them happen and making people accountable for not making the things happen. By the way, the missing element at the macro level used to be the utilities, but at CREF, the utilities are on board. And some utilities are owned by governments, some are public-private partnerships. but I can rest and assure you that the private utilities and their ESG framework, together with the funding private entities and their ESG framework, means that there is a ton of resolve to make things happen. So we need not legislation anymore. We need actual projects. The Cayman Prime Minister the Cayman Premier was very instrumental at CREF in announcing that from now on, Cayman will own their solar and renewable energy projects and put money behind it. That's an interesting change from relying totally on the private sector, because now the government is saying we're going to get in, take an equity position and get things done. In the Bahamas, the notion of not focusing just on green climate financing, but on blue carbon credit financing, and the whole notion of turning our oceans and seas into a possible funding mechanism. That is an incredible technical analysis that I've been working on. So we see governments doing things differently that are making things happen over time. And so what I see is necessary, Daniel, is for the governments to do something as opposed to pass legislation, wait around and talk now. And money is there, people are there, so let's make things happen so that the next CREF is one of projects where we've done something.
Thanks very much for that, Jerry. I think I think it brought you in at the right time. You were coming off the long run there just now, pushing off the boundary rope, so to speak. So, before we turn to, as I said, the fifth panelist and get some questions in, Jerry, thanks for that, and really, as always, provocative as always. Ministers, we just heard both from Angela and Jerry some concerns, and we know, for instance, we've spoken about the regulatory situation. Speaking from the bank's perspective, we say the money is there. Jerry mentioned that the people are there. We have the skills, we have the technology. What would your takes be on this? And in responding, I want to touch on something that you both are acutely familiar with, and that you said, Minister Young, you mentioned the CARICOM perspective and the role Trinidad and Tobago plays in supporting member countries, certainly in times of crisis. And we know the scenario in Dominica with Erica, Irma, Maria, and the list goes on. And Jerry touched on it. By the time you actually have made a decision and put a project in place, it has to be redesigned because it has been wiped out, sometimes as much as 200% of GDP. So coming out of this is urgency. The one question is urgency. We as a region have to move a lot faster. What are your responses to this from the government? And it's open season now. We kind of moving into the innings. So, anyone can take this. I'm not sure which one of the honorable ministers wants to jump in first.
Well, Daniel, I'm sorry, Minister. I should yield to your seniority, but I couldn't help it since I have been following this debate of renewable energy in the Caribbean for a long time. And one of the things that I contributed to was the establishment of CEEN in Barbados to provide, some capacity for member states in the Caribbean. But I must say, I'm trying to be as polite as I can in the circumstances.
But remember, I said the context by saying we're having a conversation in the context of how we have conversations in the Caribbean.
Yeah, but you see, this line that Jerry took there, this is an oversimplification of what is a complex situation that people who have to make political decisions find themselves in. Because we hear all of these things in the past. Guys have sold us all sorts of stuff. This is so simple. Take the low-hanging fruit. You go, you do this, you do that. My brother, I have been pursuing these things for a while. And I am still not convinced, or I would like to use that expression, but it will be lost on most of you because you don't speak Creole. But for my Creole-speaking friends, it's as if they gave us diab a sac. They give you a bag with something you don't know what's in there. Everybody's like, renewable energy, go do this. It's cheap, it's easier. When we get down to and there's no paralysis of analysis. I have been pursuing this geothermal project for the last 10 years for my government. and 3 times private partners have walked out. We passed the law in 2006. We open up our electricity sector. We are one of the countries in the region to have the first independent regulatory commission, which is fully independent. We established that in 2006. We went ahead and so we have the legislation, we passed regulations, we did licensing, we encouraged private IPPs, we've done all of this stuff. We've invested over $20 million in developing geothermal. And I'm happy to hear what Angela said, and that is most of which we grant funds to de-risk the project. Yet we are not able to get a geothermal project online. And Angela, you will be happy to know, you said you've seen the change of administration. We have not changed administration since. So we have been consistently pursuing this, and I have been for the last 20 years of my government's administration. I have been, my party's time in office, have been pursuing this personally. And so there is no analysis of paralysis. So generalization is a very dangerous thing, because we saw St. Vincent and the Grenadines took a bold decision to move into geothermal, and the CDB was right there with them. They took the risk, they tried it. We have gone ahead, and I have done private consultancy and prepare submissions for solar PV, and the numbers don't make sense, brother. They don't make sense. So some people who have it and it makes sense for them, great, let's go on with it. So what Angela is doing, and a number of countries are doing, whether it's the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or Bahamas, more power to them. But my brother, when we look at the comparison, I cannot go to the electorate and tell them I am bringing them something that does not ease up the pressure in their pockets. People want to know at the end of the month, what am I going to pay for this? We don't have the space to subsidize renewable energy. We have to be realistic. I mean, this is a conversation that we've been having, and I would like people to sit and to walk through this process. Look at the role of the utility. How can we make the transition in some cases? Because we're talking about small markets. Let's not kid ourselves. These are very small markets. And if a country like Dominica, where our installed capacity is about 26 megawatts, I mean, that's a joke. We use, since Hurricane Maria, our peak is about 15 megawatts. We have not even gone back to pre-Maria levels. So I don't have the room. I don't have the margin. I don't have much room, my brother. So Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, I mean, they got the market. They have consumption. They can run with it. Even St. Lucia is a better place. They have 3 times our consumption. I mean, so there are some, you see, there needs to be an honest conversation amongst the players, the development banks, what is the role that you can play. And I'm happy with what Minister Young said. We need to keep CDB in this picture. And I'm not saying this because I'm on your platform, comrade. You know I am consistent with that, Daniel. You know that. Because I see the role. And also, I want to add this. There is a role, and we've been pursuing a partnership with Kenneth J. Green in Trinidad and Tobago on the development of green hydrogen. We are doing now some exploration in the north. We're putting our money, brother, into this, as we've done in the past. My government has spent $40 million of our Eastern Caribbean dollars acquiring lands for geothermal development. If we were to add that to the cost of an entire project, people won't be able to pay the bills. These are the harsh realities that we are faced with. But to get back to the point, and I'm happy Angela is on board, and I hope your company is fully owned or majority owned by CARICOM people.
Minister.
We need to develop a regional private sector to move this energy transition in the Caribbean. That's the last thing I want to say, comrade, and I'm done.
Say, Daniel.
But I appreciate it.
Daniel, if you remember,
Jerry, before I let you rebut, that, and I'm loving the passion, because this is what we need.
I just want to clarify something.
Go ahead, Jerry.
So Daniel, I think it was in CREF 2012. I was then chair and dean at the board of the Inter-American Development Bank. So I brought the president of the Inter-American Development Bank and the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, Warren Smith, together. And we did a deal for $87 million, right? The Inter-American Development Bank cannot lend directly to the smaller Caribbean countries in the OECS. And in that deal, we did an analysis of geothermal, Montserrat, Dominica, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. And the deal was pretty simple. What we concocted was We would put money towards geothermal development as a grant. If we sunk a well and the well was a dud, it would be written off. If the well had commercial use, it would pay back the grant. And then the most pressing thing with smaller population countries like Dominica that had great potential in geothermal was that we had to work on a practical side, which was to develop a direct voltage underwater cable to bring that excess geothermal as an export to population centers that could use it. Barbados further south, even Trinidad, or even as far south as Guyana, or as far north where we could get US dollars as Puerto Rico. I've worked intimately on that geothermal project. I put a lot of money behind that. And to be in this discussion 15 years later, to see where it's going, and to find out that it isn't viable, or it has never been viable, is part of the historical thing that I've come to understand means we have to do better, we have to do different, but by God, we have to do something. It can't continue the way it is because people, quite frankly, are going to lose interest. The investors I have who want to do deals in the Caribbean in renewable energy, if they jump across to Africa, or they jump across to Asia, or if they jump across to any other place where things move faster, there's going to be fatigue about investing in the Caribbean.
Jerry,
So that's just my point.
I appreciate that. I know Angela wants to jump in. Angela, I'll let you jump in. I'm going to bring back in Minister Young.
No worries. It's a quick.
But Angela, in your response, Minister Henderson spoke on the matter of pricing.
Yeah, no,
right?
I want to speak to him directly to this point. I actually do want to. And also before, because
I can't
I'm gonna have
reproduce
to switch
the Creole
devices.
phrase. I can't reproduce the Creole phrase, but he said pretty much.
No, but I think I
you know,
got the gist of it.
So,
I think I got the
let us speak on the matter of pricing. Is RE as inexpensive and the savior as it has been proclaimed?
So I want to try to address just as a quick heads up. I am going to have to change devices. So let me see if I can quickly give a feedback. So
Sure.
I am not surprised that you've had the challenges that you have with that project because, and I'm sad to say that, but it's the reality of it. And I think, as you say, let's level, right? And I'm a type of developer where I don't want to be, because I am from the CARICOM, I don't want to be bringing sacks of stuff that doesn't work. Where I would have started with that project, the very beginning would say, where is the money going to come back to pay back all of this investment? That is literally where I start, besides regulation. And so in terms of, you're telling me now, I'm not familiar with the Dominica market, so forgive me, but you've told me your peak is 15 megs, you're 26 megs, right? Overall, a geothermal investment that you are making, there is no way that by basic math, it would make sense if it's just for you. So clearly you would have to look for other groups. But even then, I wouldn't invest unless I already had an agreement from the other groups that they were going to purchase that power and what price they were going to purchase. So when I look at development, I don't start with my battery is real. I always start with where's the money going to come from and what's the risk of that money coming back. That's the very, very first place I start. So I look at the utility, can they pay? I look at the private sector, can they pay? And so in the case of the geothermal project, besides the technical risk, which I can't speak to because I'm not a geothermal expert, I just know it's really, really hard, which is another thing to highlight. It is one of the hardest forms of renewable energy for you. It's like digging, I guess since we have Minister Young, it's literally like looking for oil, trying to hit oil or digging for gold. So you've layered on from my risk book. Not only have we layered on having to figure out who's going to pay for this, and also all these are various countries that you may link to who have their own politics and they have their own sources, and things may change over time, which it sounds like I believe it perhaps has, like even with Barbados, if you look at the generation capacity they're adding right now with renewables, their whole energy market is changing. So you're layering on risk, technical risk, financial risk, it is just a super hard project. And yeah, I mean, I heard about this project when it was being done, and deep down inside, I really am actually hoping it happens. But from my
Angela,
private sector, yes, go ahead.
Angela, but hold on, Angela, I know you said you want to change devices.
Yeah, I'm going to
If
switch.
you can do that
Yes.
quickly. But I'm not
I'm gonna do it
letting
quickly.
you all off the hook. When you come back,
All
you
right,
need
I
to
see.
speak to us about the price of solar PV.
Yeah, I'm going to as well. I'm
Would
going
be,
to as
I
well
know you
because I
spoke
think we
eloquently about the
missed an
geothermal,
opportunity.
because we need to speak about that, because
Yeah.
that is a
Yes, we
matter
do.
that is being,
And the
and
price is
with
not the
that I
same for
want to
each
bring,
country. The price will
absolutely.
never be the
So,
same for each country.
we're having an
Okay,
honest
I'm gonna
conversation
switch
here this morning.
devices and I'll
Please,
leave you guys to battle it
me
out.
too. So Minister Young,
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I sat here patiently and I listened. First of all, Minister Henderson, I want to have a conversation with you, a one-on-one sometime in the not too distant future. But I think he's opened up the conversation where it needs to go, right? I mean, how I interpret what he said is buying cat and bag. So people come to you with everything under the sun, no pun intended, with solar, and they tell you this can be done, that can be done. But he has hit the nail on the head. Look how much money the people of Dominica have spent in the thermal energy. When this thing was told to me a few months ago, I said I'm going to reach out to Dominica directly because, again, you need to make sure there's reality in the projects. And the truth is, a government is looking at very different metrics to what private sector is looking to. And I think that was a very good point that was made earlier, Clark, and we need to just accept it. Private sector, no matter what they tell you, they want a return and as high a rate of return as possible. When you're dealing with a population like Dominica's, that is a small population, where you're going to get the market from to invest whatever it's going to cost for these types of projects, etc. So it's very easy to say, well, look, they have this financing, they have that, but the government of Dominica, like every other government, needs to think about repayment, etc. And then you started to hear parts of the conversation, well, don't let Africa get the opportunities and don't let here get the opportunity. I mean, that's always what is thrown at you, right? There's always somebody else waiting to grab the opportunity. But you speak to our brothers and sisters in Africa, and they will tell you the exploitation continues and the difficulties that continue with them getting energy security. And that's why I'm very, very big on, unless we get together as CARICOM and we get together using not only CARICOM, but the Latin American region as a voice asking to be heard and pushing for it. And I mean, it's unfortunate Angela has dropped off, but you see how quickly the grant funding came pushed. Well, put it into policy, put it into the development of regulations, put it into the feasibility. I mean, that is a complete turn off. As a government, you want to move past those things. So the one point that I completely agree on, and I think we all agree on, it takes too long. How do we reduce that? Just yesterday I was saying it, and that's not a government issue, because as the minister, you on a cycle, you on a timeline, right? The rest of us not as lucky as Minister Henderson to be in office for decade upon decade and this type of thing. So you're working on a timeline and you're pushing hard. I mean, I've learned that from Project Lara. This thing is frustrating me that we haven't even been able to sign off on the commercial agreements. When you got the RFP done and you awarded that letter of tender, the world has changed significantly in the last 6 months in this area. The cost of a renewable project has just skyrocketed because of the demand now, because of the Russia-Ukraine geopolitical crisis that's taking place. All right, so I agree with Minister Henderson. It's too easy to use cliche terms and this and that. But when we have to deal with the realities, that's where the rubber meets the road for us. And it is not as simple, unfortunately, as it's very often made out to be, especially with some of these international, multinational lending agencies. I mean, you have it consistently. They come and say, look, we have 300 million US dollars for the region, X amount of euros for the region, etc. You know, we're looking to invest. But you try to access that. And that's why I'm pushing hard. You see the grant funding, don't just dismiss it into feasibility studies and how to get your policy right and your regulations. No, it can't be that, because to make the metrics work for the people in these islands, you need an element that covers that, because that is what will reduce the margin. So if you actually get the grant funding as a percentage of the capital cost of the project, that is how it should be applied, in my view, because it makes the project bankable to the private sector, because it's reduced the overall cost, and you're dealing with very different metrics. I mean, there's a lot that was said there, but I'll stop at this point.
Minister, I want to thank you for that. I think you kind of placed a lot squarely at CDB's doorstep as one of the leading financiers in the region. I'm happy that both Dominica and Trinidad and Tobago and I'm looking at you, Jerry, Bahamas sit on our board. The use of our resourcing, certainly grant resources, which, as we know from the contributions we got on our last cycle, have been substantially compressed. But these are things that we expect our board member countries to raise at the level of the board. But we have been terribly impolite to our fifth panelist, and that is our audience. And at this time, I really want to give them an opportunity to pose a question. We have a question here from Hazley Vincent. Is Angela back with us? I know she was switching devices. But to Angela's point, do we have enough collaboration among Caribbean territories to achieve the scale needed to improve the economics around RE? If not, which organization can coordinate this? But Jerry, I want to bring you back in from your global view. Do we have enough collaboration to achieve scale?
Scale, Daniel, that's a very interesting question. And it's not a static question. It's a dynamic question because scale changes depending on population and also depending on final use of the resources. In the case of the Caribbean, like Dominica.
Jerry, I think your audio giving a little bit of a challenge there, Jerry. Try again. In the case of scale. All right, while Jerry gets his audio worked out, Jerry, if you work on your audio. Angela, the question really is, do we have enough? Jerry, we're going to come right back to you. Do we have enough collaboration among member countries in the region to achieve scale in
I
RE?
I would say it's a difficult question because I'm not certain that total collaboration would also change the answer for, in terms of scale for each island, because each one has its own merits, its own challenges. They're all quite different, and they may also need different types of solutions and technology for their markets. So I think in terms of achieving scale, if you were saying, well, scale in terms of what? Is the scale in terms of financing? I think, yes, that's one that you could look at. But again, the risk profile of each country is also quite different. So in terms of, again, I speak to like large multilateral banks, which are looking at the overall region, including CDB. That's in essence kind of scale, right? You have a financing fund or a pool of capital that's for the region, rather than just being for a single country. But if you're talking about procurement, each country is looking at different technologies at different periods of time, may need different things. How are you going to buy everything for everyone at the same time and get the scale on procurement? It's just not possible. I see Minister Henderson laughing at me. I hope he's laughing because he's agreeing, but he can also laugh and disagree. But I'm just talking about being pragmatic here. Even just the contracting, the construction of the projects. How are you going to gain scale by that's one of the big areas where you try to get the best pricing, right? You go to a contractor and say, look, we're going to be doing 100 megs or 200 megs. We're not doing just a 1 megawatt installation. But the contractor is going to say, but where is the project? And if you say, well, it's scattered across all these different countries, the contractor may say, well, I'll do this one, but I won't do the other ones. Or we have people in this country, but we don't have persons in the other country. So, and even just understanding the subcontractor market, that's also quite different. Because each country, you're not going to want the contractor to, I know at least I can speak for Jamaica and some of the other countries. I see against the ministers laughing. Are we going to ship a bunch of foreigners to each country? Each minister, you're not going to want to go to your minister of finance or your prime minister and say, well, we're not employing anyone locally, but we got a good deal on the contract and we're importing labor. No, you want to hire your own people. So again, how do you do that at scale across the region? So, scale in terms of, and I see the comment that's come in from David Coombs. Hi, David. How are you doing? One way in which we've looked at scale, at least for Seleco, on the distributed power side, but that's by country market, right? So what we've done is we basically pool together, at least we've tried, and we're trying, but it's still very hard. But we pool together a series of projects for a number of industrial clients, roughly around the same time, and we say, okay, we're going to deliver this all, and we're going to deliver the scale in terms of standardization of contracts, standardization of EPC contracts, And then in terms of relationship, because we're buying over and over again, we're not a one-time, one-time transaction. So now we have a relationship with the contractors. And in that way, we're able to negotiate better because in their eyes, we're a repeat customer. So there's going to be scale. So I'm going to pause there and see.
I want to
you
thank
guys
you
can
for
feel
that
free to
last
disagree.
I think, am I back?
I
Daniel?
want to thank you for that last point. Jerry, we're going to come back to you, but I want to thank you for that last point and the matter of harmonization or at least standardization. Because earlier in the conversation, Minister Young kind of threw the ball at CDB in terms of being that clearinghouse for the region and playing that kind of overarching role. And I think we also have a role to play with respect to standardization. As we said recently, we have different RFPs, different regulations in each of our 19 borrowing member countries. And it perhaps makes it difficult to achieve the same scale we're trying to achieve. Sorry, Jerry, you want
Daniel, let me
you're
jump
back.
in
You want to
there.
finish your
I
point?
had dropped from the call, but what I was going to say is scale. Scale is a function of the end user.
Oh, Jerry, we lost you again.
But Daniel,
Sorry, Minister Young. Was that Minister Young or Henderson?
Yeah, I was trying to jump in, but I see Minister Anderson. Just let me just make one clarification point.
Sure.
I am promoting CDB, all right, because I think part of the complication is for each CARICOM territory, we don't know who's coming at I don't know who's coming at Dominica. What are the terms they're coming at with Dominica? Whereas what they're coming with Trinidad is different with Barbados. And whilst we accept every territory has a different risk profile and a different circumstances, even, for example, terrain in Dominica is different from Trinidad, so where you would put solar, etc., etc. I want to promote CDB because we need to simplify it and we need to derive, as governments, economies of scale, to use a simple term, that could benefit each of our territories. And I am looking for a champion that can do that. So, and why can't CDB do that? Because CDB must be able to know, okay, each individual territory, these are the laws, these are the regulations that apply. But now everybody, rather than run into Dominica telling them one story, run into Trinidad telling me a different story, telling Barbados a different story. Nah, go to CDB, and CDB now will become our champion, and then pull us in and say, hey, Vince, Stuart, this is what has some potential, etc. This is what they're telling us, because they go and tell Vince, boy, look, them fellas down in Trinidad, they're trying to get it at this amount, and you no. So let's simplify it for all of us. And if we don't move quickly, we're going to lose the opportunities. So I just wanted to clarify that point. I am promoting CDB, right? A few months ago, a couple months ago, your new CEO president came to see me, and that was my message. And I said, that is what we need to look at. I'll stop there, Vince. Over to you.
Minister Young, I want to thank you for that. And you can't see it or hear it, but my team members behind the camera were all applauding. So,
Can I make it quick?
But Angela, before I let you back in, I know
Sure, no
Minister
problem.
Henderson wanted to come in.
Daniel,
Minister Henderson.
Yeah, I just want to know, Angela, I was shaking my head because you said something that I said to my well, I will still call them colleagues, but former colleagues. When we were discussing this on a technical level, I felt that some of the points that you raised are some of the points that I made, because it is inherently difficult to do this. I'm not saying it's impossible, because there can be some joint procurement in certain aspects, but and again, for practical experience, we tried it for geothermal drilling. We're hoping that when the rig is done in St. Vincent, to avoid the mobilization and remobilization costs, it will come to Dominica. But by the time they were done in St. Vincent, we're not ready. We're not ready. So, but I would like to make a different point, though. What I think is that there are some technologies, although maybe solar doesn't lend itself to that, but wind, for example, geothermal. Why don't we build the competence within the region, build the capacity within the region? Why do I need to get this specialized equipment to put up a wind turbine for me in the region that has to come from outside of the region? Why do I need to get drilling companies when Trinidad and Tobago has been drilling for over 100 years? Why don't they get the expertise? And I will tell you, Minister, we reached out to one drilling company in Trinidad, and Tobago, and we got them to tender on the drilling project in Dominica. Unfortunately, they did not have the requisite geothermal expertise on the team. I encouraged them and I put them in touch with different companies that they could possibly enter into some arrangement. We also need to start thinking about that. So I am all for, joint procurement and scale and all this stuff, but I still believe that there are some competence that we need to have within the region, because my view is we need to build our regional private sector to lead this transition. And this is where I agree with Minister Young that CDB is central to that arrangement. I am worried that we're allowing people to come in our region to harness our wind, our sun, and to do projects. These are not difficult projects. Angela, you're right. Geothermal is difficult, expensive, and so. But I will tell you, the good news about it is that we have de-risked the project. We have wells, by the way, that are producing steam. All we are seeking to do now is to construct the plant itself on, that would convert to power. So we are not that far. And yes, and Jerry, you're right. We're looking at exporting to our neighboring territories. And in our case, we're looking at Guadeloupe and Martinique. They're closer. They have a greater demand, and they're paying a premium because they subsidize power in those islands. That is, France subsidizes the power. So we had a ready market, and that is where we are going with this. Based on the discussions we've had, based on our project financing and everything, it is a viable project, and we can get a tariff, obviously heavily subsidized since the government has made the initial investments. That is much less than yours, Angela, in solar. So that's the reality.
So, Minister, I think, somewhere out there, Dr. Gary Jackson, my good friend and yours, is smiling because he's the head of, as you know, the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And that has been one of his bugbears, the importance of building regional capacity. We have done certain projects. We have the knowledge within the region, and we need to leverage that. Angela, I know you want to come back in, but I haven't let you off the hook. We need to talk about the cost of solar PV. I know you think
Sure. No problem. So basically, no, the quick comment I was going to make following on Minister Young was in terms of, and I think this is a good forum, in terms, you can always get scale in terms of knowledge. So even from a developer perspective, we do work with, like I've worked for the first project, I worked with strategic partners, international companies, but, I've gone to conferences now overseas where I've met developers from Africa, Philippines, basically Asia, Europe, all around, local developers, the ones who are sweating on the ground, doing a lot of the hard, the heavy lifting and work. And now we compare notes. So I'll call up my friend in Israel and say, have you worked with this company? He said, oh, don't touch them. I'd never work with them. And that is, in my view, kind of a way of, scaling in terms of that knowledge.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, Minister. You were hitting on that. And certainly within our revised energy sector strategy, that is one of the areas we need to focus on, and the role CDB plays in ensuring that we protect our borrowing member countries.
And that happens. Daniel, just let me one quick bilateral
Sure.
with Minister Henderson. And Minister Henderson, you see, even with those things, if we start reaching out to each other, you're looking for a drilling rig, so it might be a Trinidadian company, but I would pick up the phone, I would put pressure on the multinationals here and say, listen, Dominica needs X type of drilling rig, and because of the type of relationship they're in with me, meaning Trinidad and Tobago, I may be able to assist. And that is one of the things that bothers me that isn't happening in the region. Exactly what Angela just touched on. You need, I came from the national security just before this, and I always used to tell our international intelligence friends in the international world of intelligence, you have to have informal conversations. Because by the time you go through the formal conversations, it close to happening. Whereas if we just constantly having the informal conversation, and it applies, I realize that applies all around. I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you for that. Jerry, you back with us with the audio? You're either muted or we're not hearing you, Jerry. And I'm not suggesting it's because of the comment you made on with respect to governments that your audio has been cut.
I was just giving a hint with the intelligence services.
I know. The minister just said he came from a national security briefing. But listen, Jerry, if we could take Jerry off screen so we could get his audio sorted. But we have a comment here from a question from Danny Lewis Bino with respect to technical capacity. And before I throw it over to the panelists, I want to just make the point that we at CDB have been collaborating with CEEN, Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, for exactly this, twofold: building regional capacity, but also seeking to develop integrated resource resilience plans across our utilities within the region. So we certainly have started along that road. But let me ask our panelists, how much further can we go with respect to regional cooperation and capacity building?
Well, boy, Daniel, we have done a lot, and I want to commend our friends at CARICOM and Dr. Jackson, Dr. Binger from SIDSDOC for the creation of CEEN, and CEEN is providing the capacity, some of the capacity that we need to help in project preparation, in analysis, advisory services. So we have been building that capacity. I think we need to take stock of where we are before people go around making those statements. They need to see what's there, because there are a lot. I mean, as a Dominican, I've been in government for the last 22 years, and I didn't know that we had some of the skills on island that we have. You know, and even geothermal training. The number of Dominicans who've received geothermal training either in New Zealand or in Iceland over the last 20 years, you know, I mean, you'll be surprised at the kind of skills we have on island. So I think we need to take stock before we can respond to this in that way. But I think part of the challenge we have in the region is that our people have not been given enough opportunities. They've not had, I would say, enough opportunities, some of those who have the training, to be placed in situations where they could actually do stuff. So I think it is left to us as well to have more confidence in our people, to give them the opportunity to do stuff. Obviously, we want to get it right, and we have consultants, we have foreign companies and foreign competencies that we bring in to assist. But I think by and large, we are, in my mind, we doing ourselves a disservice by not truly appreciating the amount of skills we have within the region. And I mean, you talk to Dr. Jackson, and you call any meeting, and I'm sure Jerry can tell you call a CREF meeting, and the amount of people you have, young people especially, who've been trained in various fields, who themselves can get that transition.
You know, I want to make the point here. I mean, certainly we speak about CEEN and the other CARICOM agencies that we have been working with. Because I think, as you mentioned, you know, it's a region-wide approach needed. And with this in mind, it would be remiss of me not to touch on the great work that Raquel Moses and the team at the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator are also doing to mobilize resources into the region and to do that matching between developers and financiers as well. So it is CDB, it is CARICOM, it is CCSA. You know, we need almost a full court press on this. Minister Young, I want to put you on the spot a little bit. I mentioned it earlier with respect to the EU. I deeply appreciate how we have focused the conversation with respect to a one Caribbean type approach. But we don't exist in this world alone. And we know the EU is pursuing carbon border adjustment mechanisms, a regulation. And it's supposed to be fully implemented by 2026. And that would effectively render carbon-intensive products less competitive in the EU market. This is the reality. That is what the mechanism is focused on. How much of an immediate concern should that be for our commodity producers like yourselves, and is essentially for the wider region? What are your thoughts on this?
Let me speak firstly about Trinidad. So it is I wouldn't put it as a concern, it's a reality. So immediately, again, we're fortunate in Trinidad, for those who know the setup, our petchem plants as the ammonia, urea, UAN, and methanol plants are at Point Lisas. So they're in a cluster. So immediately what we're looking at, and what I'm trying to move quickly, but we all know the difficulty of doing that sometimes, is carbon capture, sequestration, and utilization. The vision is, let us build infrastructure right there. All of these exporters of ammonia, methanol, urea, UAN can tap into that plant, and it's going to be hopefully a joint venture between government and the owners of these plants will capture the carbon, so they're decarbonizing their commodity for export. So immediately they get the benefits there. We're also looking at other areas, and each of these plants, because fortunately, again, for Trinidad, they are global giants in their own scheme. So they're in the top 3 ammonia and methanol producers in the world. So they know what they have to do. So the government now comes in addition to what they are doing on their individual plants. And I say we use that cluster concept and see how we can help them decarbonize by partnering with them. So that is the vision for that. But we are also moving. There are other things that can be done. You can use, as you know, the hydrogen into some of the products. That also helps with the cleanup and helps them to have cleaner commodity products. But those are the types of things that we're doing on the methane side. We've mandated our national gas company and our oil producing company, Heritage State Oil Company. We are already using the technology that's available to identify where the methane leaks may be taking place, etc. So in other words, we're utilizing technology and learning from where other places in the world have had to do this to clean up the products. And what I'll say is the last thing to do is panic. What are the potential solutions? What is it that we can do? There are other things that can be worked in. Again, fortunately for us, if you work solar into the electricity production side, all of these things you get carbon credits for, as well as decarbonization. So that is how we intend and what we're looking to do to keep the products coming from Trinidad, being exported from Trinidad, to be sufficient to fall into the brackets that they will create.
That is solid. That's great news, Minister. I'm quite heartened to hear that. I want to turn the conversation a little bit because I appreciate the fact that we getting into the final overs here. So Angela, I want to turn this one on you. Well, really, this one is thrown out to everyone because it touches everyone. I would not be allowed to return to my office, given that the social sector division is in the projects department, if I didn't touch on the fact that it is widely appreciated that the energy sector is one of the most non-diverse sectors within the region, globally, actually. Unfortunately, this panel is perhaps an example of that. The question I'm asking here is, Angela, with the success that your company has had, the single largest solar PV project in the region,
until the one in Trinidad is built.
Until the one,
but that's good. No, but that's great. I mean, that's what we want, right?
Progress.
We want to see progress. No, we want to see progress.
Angela, just before Daniel finishes, I intend to go out for RFP as soon as that one is done over all of the illegally quarried land in Trinidad. So I expect that you would take a look at it and put in a proposal.
She will take a look at that.
But no problem. No, we're looking forward to seeing that.
So team, and throwing this out to the entire team. Can we say that the situation is changing with respect to diversity within the gender sphere within the energy sector? Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. I see Jerry nodding his head. I'll hand over to Jerry. I would like to say yes. I do think, but I don't think it's just a renewable energy point. I don't think it's just an energy point. I think what we're seeing in terms of the gender imbalance is very much it's the nature of the industry overall energy sector. I mean, renewables is actually one of the better ones compared to, let's say, even traditional oil and gas sectors, which are even more so male dominated. And I'm really proud to be a female entrepreneur and founder of a company to hopefully trailblaze and give an example that it can be done, by young women. But I mean, I would just throw it out there that it's not just a point of renewables itself, but I do see that it is getting, increasingly positive. But I would let the gentlemen give their views.
The answer is yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. In Trinidad, our state oil company, Heritage, is the CEO, is a woman. BPTT in Trinidad is run by a woman. Whenever you're sitting in these meetings, and yesterday, just sitting at the energy conference, that comment was made. You look around at the room. The answer is yes. The balance is not only taking place, but it's going to tip, in my view, in the right direction in the not too distant future.
Thank you for that. This is good news, Minister Henderson. We'll ask Jerry to come in on this from the perspective of CREF. Minister Henderson, well, what is your take from the OECS perspective?
Yeah, well, we've seen increasingly the role of women in the sector. As a matter of fact, they have set up their own organization, and we've seen a number of them. So even in Dominica, and although historically we've always been women have always been at the fore in anything that's happening in Dominica. We've had a woman prime minister for 15 years, from 1980 to 1995. You know, we even in the federation, our first representative was a woman. So we have a history of that, and even now our utility company, which we recently acquired a majority shares in, it's run by a woman, and with a deputy being another woman. So we have that kind of I don't know if it's deliberate or if it's by design or just by accident, but we have the participation of women in the sector, just as we have throughout every sector in Dominica.
Well, this is encouraging. Jerry, I know at CREF, you actually put in place a Women in Renewable Energy forum within CREF. You want to weigh in on this one, Jerry? Well, I think we're still having some challenges.
Yeah, we're not hearing him.
You know, we're still having some challenges there with Jerry. So I want us to turn then give our fifth panelist one last opportunity. If we could put one final question to our panelists, we're winding down. I'm not seeing one popping up, but I saw one earlier that I want to pose to the panel, and that was on the matter of trickling down all that we have discussed in the education sphere. Now, I want to go out on a limb here and say perhaps I'm the oldest member of this team here this morning. So it is important. It is important that for the energy transition to happen, we need our youth and young people on board, or all of our efforts will be for naught in a few years. What are we seeing within the energy space? And what role do you see CDB playing within the education space as it relates to ensuring that the region has a viable crop of youth and young people energized, pardon the pun, for this transition?
I could speak for Trinidad. Let me take that ball. I could speak for Trinidad. It is already happening, right?
Great.
Fortunately, again, for us, I mean, a lot is spent on the education side, and you always find the young people, they are following what is going on. They're thinking, okay, where do I need to study to be employable? But like Angela, the entrepreneurship, certainly from my point of view, I think I'm seeing a lot more young people heading into that entrepreneurship space. And to survive in the world of entrepreneurship, you need to be nimble, you need to be flexible. And I think as we move forward, again, this is just my personal view, it's not a governmental view. I think the formal side of education, that's changing a lot. And that not, we need to keep our eye on that. And it's a positive thing. And I think the young people are more in tune with it, because of the world of technology, the world of internet, social media, and these types of things, you have a lot more information readily available at your fingertips. So they are heading in that way. I mean, I look at the only time I really get to look at television is to watch the news, and I see the ads in Trinidad coming on, and the sale of solar for your home, and I'm thrilled. I look at the newspaper, it's young people pushing that. They're the owners of these companies, so they're already in that space. Certainly in the energy sector, the traditional oil and gas, plenty young people. And it's something I have always tried to encourage. You, the young people, come in as the sponges, learn from the more experienced people, but bring to the table, open your mouth, put your views on the table, because the older people, they've learned at a different time. That innovation, that use of technology, you bring it to the table. Let's think outside of the box. I think society has changed a lot more to allow young people that space to talk, but then the ones with the experience have to temper it in certain ways.
Absolutely. Minister Henderson, your views from the being a young person yourself.
I'm not young anymore, man. I started this thing robbed me of my youth. I've been pursuing a geothermal power plant from the days of my youth. But yeah, we see the young people just moving on their own. They see the opportunity, and they're leading the way. I mean, I had a very interesting discussion with an electrical and electronic engineer yesterday. That's a guy who would set up our speakers for us when we have events, and so I didn't realize the guy was so well trained. And he was the one who was telling me about solar installation, for example. And I've seen a number of young people who've just taken the initiative. What we've tried to do is to give them the support, both in terms of small business support, but also in ensuring that there are no barriers for them to do what it is that they're seeking to do, and allow them the opportunity to help us fashion what this sector will look like. I think that is also very, very important. And we're bringing them to the table, we're listening to them, and they're actively involved. I think more and more we have to give them that opportunity. The only thing I would say, and I've said it before, and I want to thank Gary at CEEN for betting on the young people. His internship program, he has some internship programs going on, and he has recruited a number of young professionals from the region to work at that center in Barbados. And that is the kind of thing we need to do, to give them the opportunity and to ensure that they can get the kind of experience to really improve their skills. And that is what I would ask, that we trust them and give them the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I want to add to that, certainly that we also at CDB, we certainly have an intern on board, but it's something that we could scale. So I appreciate that comment. Angela, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I was just going to come in. So I'm happy Minister Henderson mentioned CEEN, because so we are for the summer, even though we're a startup, we're a young company, we've hired interns for the first time this year, including one that came from CEEN. And he's actually doing a very, very good job. And so we're hoping that we're able to convert that into a full-time hire. And it's kind of cool. I like to see that young energy in our Caribbean people, because it's very, when you think startup and when you think young and interest, you tend to think more OECD, Silicon Valley, California. But what about us? Why can't the Caribbean be a kind of a breeding ground for our young talent and get them to do new things and make me look old? Like, I'm excited that they're making me look like the old person. And additionally, I will add that I guess for University of the West Indies, I was very impressed. We have 2 female interns, both of who basically are doing renewable energy degrees. I didn't even know that existed. So the fact that part of our curriculum in our universities, our local universities, are also including renewables, for me is also a very, very good sign and a very good step in the right direction. And it's up to us as the more senior members, whether it's on the public sector side or more humbly my side on the private sector, to be able to give our young ones the opportunity to step up and to be kind of the trailblazers and to take the reins from us when we kind of move on and it's now their turn to kind of continue with the energy transition.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So, the last question that was posed, I think I'll take that one. I think Andrew Robinson had asked the question as it relates to difficulty and knowing who to contact in the region. I'm going to take moderator's privilege here and say I think we heard a strong vote of confidence for CDB being kind of a central figure in the region. Pretty much we liaise quite closely, and I saw someone put up a comment with respect to we need CEEN, CrossCo, etc., to move this transition, and we have interventions with all of them, with Climate Smart Accelerators, CEEN, CrossCo. So Andrea, please, feel free to contact us, and we will do the requisite dissemination across the region. We have come to the end. This has been a most robust and muscular at times conversation, just like we like it in the region. But I give our panelists, one final say, closing remarks based on the conversation, based on your extensive knowledge and expertise of the region. What would you want our participants, who have been absolutely awesome this morning, what would you want them to take away from this? Jerry, I'm going to give you the first shot. I'm hoping that your audio is back, is on. Is it, Jerry? Oh, I don't think Jerry's location is conducive to that. So, Minister Henderson, what would you want the concluding thought to be to our audience this morning?
Well, first of all, I don't want Jerry to believe that he was being sabotaged by the government of Dominica. But we don't have those capabilities. Maybe Trinidad and Tobago does. But
Minister Young is saying, "Speak for yourself."
I am staying quiet and listening to Minister Henderson.
But I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Daniel, and you've been an excellent moderator. Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank CDB for the format. I think very often we really rush through a lot of stuff. We don't get the opportunity to develop points as we have. And Mr. Young, I suspect we have some work to do together.
Correct.
We have a good vibe going, good connection, good. And I'm sorry I couldn't be in Trinidad and Tobago yesterday. I joined very briefly, and Raquel, I have to thank her for her invitation and for organizing this. But I want to say though, in the region, we really need to think regional. I think with all of this conversation, I mean, comrades, let's be fair with ourselves. You cannot move from a situation where outside of Trinidad and Tobago and now Guyana that producing oil, you're buying oil and gas from outside of your country. Now you have a resource that you can harness to help your country, to develop your country, and we keep depending on people from outside our region to do that for us. There is no big science, and I'm saying this, loosely, in wind energy, in solar energy. I mean, this is not the expansive and extensive investment in geothermal, both in terms of technology and capital. I mean, this is essentially using, our sun or wind to power our homes, and our businesses. We need to take control of this, and we must resist people coming from outside giving us the impression that this thing is so easy. And every time a country comes to help you, they bring in all their private sector to descend upon us, as if to say we don't know how to connect two panels. If I need to connect two panels, I can call Gary. If I need to put a megawatt of solar power there, I'm sure Gary can do that for me. I have Devon there. I mean, the point is, we need to build up our regional private sector to take over that transition. And this is why, Minister Young, I agree with you. And I'm saying this not because this is a CDB platform, but because I believe we have to use our development bank in the region to pull this together, to make sure that we have the right regional capacity to do that transformation, because there are people in the region. Absolutely. And there are private investors who would be very happy to invest in some of these projects if we give them the opportunity, if we reach out to them, and if we include them in the conversation. So it doesn't seem to be just governments doing their thing. And I finally will say, we need to do the transition well-informed, and the work that CCRI, CDB are doing with the IRRPs, looking at this integrated approach, looking at the resources, and looking at what is the best approach for that transition. We need to focus on that and not get carried away by people pressuring us to increase the amount of renewables. I mean, to what end?
Correct.
To what end?
So Minister, thank you for that. I want to give the other panelists, I think we don't 15 seconds. Minister,
I endorse what Minister Henderson has said. Daniel, you've been an excellent moderator. CDB, thank you for this opportunity. On closing, CDB, the mandate is yours. Pick up the baton now and pull it together. That last point that Minister Henderson raised, how, from an investment point of view, I want to give CDB this challenge. You be the entity to look at the region and to put together a potential investment off of the plant and machinery in different CARICOM islands. So you pull together that hedge fund, that whatever fund it is, that persons with private sector money can invest in, and that money will then be used to put down the plant that is needed, be it in renewables or whatever else throughout the rest of the CARICOM. Don't let it be the big banks, a Citi or Credit Suisse or whoever coming in and telling us we could do it. You all have that intellectual capacity. You have the support of the various governments.
Thank you.
Pick up the baton, run with it. You have our support.
Well, Minister Young, putting my hand up and accepting that challenge on behalf of the bank. Thank you for that. I didn't see Angela there. I think she may
I
have
think
had
Angela
to.
dropped off,
She
unfortunately.
may have had to drop off. Jerry, this is your last bite at it. Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
If not,
Yes, man.
yeah.
Hey guys,
Go for it.
listen, Daniel. In the Bahamas right now, we have this hurricane storm that was tropical storm came off of Mexico. So we had water spouts, we had tornadoes, we've had tremendous flooding. Right now, I'm dealing with climate change, guys, and so the reality of this renewable energy discussion is, if you guys don't do something quickly about climate change, all of us came on different ships, but as Martin Luther King said, we all came on different ships, but now we all in the same boat. So I'll end by saying we have to get moving, because climate change is going to wipe us all out if we don't do something to help ourselves. That's it for me. Daniel, excellent. Thanks. Everything about CDB, you know I agree with. And if I can make it happen with my private sector group of investors, my utilities, etc., we'll help you along the way. Thanks, guys. And thanks,
So all that's left for me to do is to thank our
share stage with you.
Thank you so much. Let me just thank our panelists for an excellent conversation. Thank you for the robustness. Thank you for the points put forward. This is the beginning of the next phase. And CDB, we stand ready and will, as the minister said, take the baton and run with it. Thank you to our audience for the great insights. And all that's left for me to do really is to say, stay well, God bless, and thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.